So, as said, I'm Valeria Pulignano. I'm from Leuven, and I'm panel member of the SH3 panel. Now, for those who are probably familiar with this panel, what I could say more is that it's a panel which covers the theme of social world and its interactions, and basically embeds different disciplines: sociology, social psychology, education science, communication studies. My professor Ines talked very much and very deeply about the assessment. Now, what I could say here is nothing else than reiterating what she already said about the general overarching assessment that basically is done. As far as my panel is concerned, in fact, we basically base assessment upon the groundbreaking nature of the proposal, but also we look very much at the clarity, the simplicity in the way in which objectives are framed. We looked also very much at how central questions, research questions, are in fact framed within and they link with these objectives. And also, of course, the approach is very important, although the approach, of course, is much more assessed in the second step, B2. But nevertheless, as has also been said before, it is important to look at the overarching idea and also the way in which this will be implemented. So, although the approach is not part of the evaluation in the first step, but nevertheless, it constitutes, the kind of an overarching thing. But I have to say here, I have to stress, in fact, in the first stage, we look particularly at the idea. If I might give a tip here to potential applicants, particularly for the B1, the first step, don't just tell things to us, but just try also to go a bit more in depth and illustrate your idea. This is, I think, very important in order to give the possibility to the panel members to really understand the novelty and the originality of your proposal. In fact, again, I talked already about these evaluation steps, step 1, step 2. Each proposal is evaluated in 2 different steps. Now, step 1, particularly, as I said before, evaluates on this novel idea, the ambition of the proposal, the groundbreaking nature of the proposal, and B2, in fact, evaluates more on the, overarching also methodological aspects, so the approach and the budget and the feasibility, of course, of the proposal. Now, each proposal normally is usually evaluated by at least 3-4 internal panel members and also 1 or 2 remote reviewers who are very much expert in the particular subject area of the proposal. So you can be sure that each proposal is really evaluated by the best experts ever on that particular area. How the evaluation normally goes, as far as, again, I can talk about my own experience in my own panel, where we take each proposals very seriously and very much in depth. We looked very much in depth at each proposal. We have a very open and at-length conversation of each proposal so that the assessment is really made on the base of a solid and also fair setting. I can also say that each assessment is a very dynamic process where, in fact, as I said, each review, also external or internal, which is made, is really taken very seriously. So we tend to really work very much on each proposal in order to assess really the best, and to let, of course, in the first step only the best of the best passing into step 2, because, as has been said already, the process is very competitive. Now, regarding the panel selection and keywords, this is a point that has been covered very much in details by Ines. What can I say more here? Regarding the SH3 panel selection, should not be guided primarily only by the empirical topic of the project. But mainly what I see myself is that the key criteria are normally, what I could call here the style of knowledge production. In other words, what matters most here is how knowledge is produced, validated, framed within a particular epistemological tradition, rather than the specific object of the study. So in this sense, selecting the appropriate panel, I think, probably requires careful attention and also attention to epistemological fit. Very much. So different panels normally might address similar empirical topics, and that's in fact what happens, but they normally differ in terms of what counts as a strong way of explaining things, what is explained, what kind of theoretical and the nature of the theoretical contribution which are made and how they are valued, how empirical, for example, evidence is expected to be kind of mobilized. Therefore, panel choice, which is of course an individual choice, my tip here would be, try to reflect or try to make it in order to reflect the analytical logic of the proposal rather than only its thematic content. Keywords, of course, here play also an important, crucial role in this process, as they are not only simply descriptive labels, but are key instrument, which, as has been also reiterated by Ines, they guide the panel members in selecting which kind of reviewers are the best fit for the proposal. So also here, keeping a lot of attention on what kind of keywords you use. So in this sense, I would say that the keyword selection should be really approached strategically by applicants. So a first set, for example, of keywords could be firmly anchored, for example, in a kind of recognizable field of research. For example, they could include core substantial domains, such as, I don't know now in my field, labor markets, organizations, I don't know, inequality, education, communication, or whatsoever. In addition, the keywords should also probably incorporate also some core analytical concept, which could guide the panel members in the way in which the proposal structure the argument, as well as the core theoretical frameworks, which could be also interesting, that define, in fact, the intellectual positioning, if you like, of the proposal. And in this way, this combination could ensure that the proposal is, clearly situated within an established scholarly conversation and can be easily recognized by reviewers, again, as belonging to their own area of expertise. What I could also here perhaps say as a second choice of keywords, here you could think about, for example, the methodological approaches that you want to use. You are using in your proposal: ethnography, comparative research, network analysis, or computational methods, you might also want to include references to, if the proposal deals with contemporary transformations. For example, digitalization, AI, or many other sort of things. So, overall, what I can say here is that keywords, as already said, are important. Are important because they signal the empirical, the theoretical, methodological orientation of the project, and therefore, they should be selected in a kind of good way. Now, I've been also kind of thinking and asked to think about what kind of weaknesses and strengths do normally I see in the proposals that I've been kind of looking through all my experience. Well, not long experience, I have to say, but nevertheless, probably significant. So I can talk, of course, only about my personal experience. What I can say here is that what I see is that normally a recurring set of weaknesses in ERC Consolidator Grant proposal concern the relationship between objective analytical framing and also actual execution. In other words, what I want to say here is that in a number of cases, the objectives of some proposals are clearly formulated and well structured, but normally what happens also is that they tend to remain difficult to see, at least from the side of the panel members, how far they truly advance frontier knowledge. So in other words, while research goals are, explicitly set up there, the epistemic contribution sometimes is not fully convincing. And this is often linked to a partial misalignment, I would say, between the analytical framing and the stated objectives. So the proposal presents a conceptual or theoretical framing, for example, but this framing does not always fully correspond to or adequately support what the project claims it will achieve. And as a result, even when the idea is strong, weaknesses in the way objectives are, in fact, linked to the idea in the way in which are operationalized and executed in terms of, executing the idea that is out there. This basically can end up jeopardizing the innovative potential of the project. And this is really a pity. Another important issue I would like to mention here concerns the interpretation of originality. Many proposals sometimes position themselves as groundbreaking, but de facto they are rather incremental. In the way in which, for example, their claims of originality and novelty are sometimes, very limited. Just to give some example here, being the first to study a particular topic or to collect a data set or to explore a specific empirical case is not in itself sufficient to establish frontier contribution. In here terms, what matters the most is not only novelty and empirical focus, but also whether the project produces a genuinely new conceptual, theoretical, or analytical understanding. So new knowledge, as in fact we say. So in several cases, proposals, what we see, remain incremental rather than transformative, despite being framed in terms of innovation, exactly because they miss a bit this, emphasis on new knowledge. Closely related to this is also a tendency sometimes in proposals to conflate concept and theoretical perspectives. Rather than clearly distinguishing between analytical lenses, theoretical traditions, and operational concepts, these elements are sometimes blended in ways that reduce analytical clarity. And this is, again, very bad because it affects the coherence of the overall argument. It makes it harder, at least for the panel members, to understand what exactly is being theoretically advanced. A further recurring tension, I would mention, appears in the relationship between empirical scale and theoretical ambition. Now, some projects rely, for example, on relatively small n designs and yet aim to make claims about broader processes, mechanism, or systemic dynamic. Now, let me be very clear here. I'm not saying that, small n designs are per se problematic for an ERC, because this would not be true. But what I want to say here is, if you have small n designs and you want to build on these, try also to convincingly articulate how such, small n will bring to broader kind of generalization and how this broader generalization will be accomplished. So this will mean that, you will need to bridge between empirical scope and theoretical inference, and this should be, in fact, fully developed. There are also, I would say, concerns regarding suitability, clarity, and transparency sometimes of the approach which is used, in the sense that sometimes the overall approach is sometimes not sufficiently explicit in showing how methods are selected in relation to the research questions and objectives. And this can also create some ambiguity about the internal logic of the project designs, particularly regarding how different components of the research fit together into a much more broader, coherent strategy. And last but not least, although this is mainly, for B2, what we see here is the visibility and risk management, which sometimes is often also insufficiently addressed. Now, idea and new knowledge is important, and so forth, but also feasibility is important. So what we see is that sometimes some projects fail because while ambitious objectives, are there, they are not matched very credibly with credible implementation strategies, and therefore, mitigation strategies are underdeveloped, not fully convincing, and they are, weakening overall the kind of settings of the project. Now, If you are lucky, and I hope you do and will, you will be invited to step 2 for an interview. Here, giving a tip, just one, be simple. Be simple in the way in which you present your idea. Start from the what, how, and why question. So the simple question. And of course, make clear how you exactly are the ones that will be able to reach out, the idea and to accomplish the idea, to address the idea that you are putting forward. Finally, some recommendations from my side. Again, take it for a pinch of salt, is my personal view here. So a central recommendation for ERC Consolidator Grant proposal I would give here is that, these proposals should not be understood as exercising in filling a gap in the literature. So the ERC, as you know, is not primarily about incremental contribution or completing existing research agendas. Instead, it is about, kind of supports research that is bold and agenda setting, with the capacity to shift the direction of a field. And what this means in practice is that a strong ERC proposal should demonstrate a clear intellectual rupture with existing work. It should not only extend what is already known, but tell us what we do not know yet. And this means to fundamentally reframe how a problem is understood. In that sense, a successful project is one that would remain valuable, even if only partially successful, perhaps, because exactly its intellectual contribution lies in opening new directions rather than delivering predefined outputs. So here, for example, if a project feels completely safe, linear, and fully predictable, perhaps it is not really an ERC. Another thing I want to say is that at the core of an ERC proposal, your particular consolidator grant should be, therefore, one strong, central, and sharply formulated research question. Very simple. And this question should be sufficiently clear in what, in fact, it is expressed. So I would say, express your research question in 1 or 2 sentences in a very simple way, without, going so much more than that. The research design, the theory, and the methods should also be organized around this central question, in a very simple way, very clear way, rather than presenting multiple loosely connected objectives. Another key aspect is the way that, in fact, I talked before about this transformative potential, and the transformative potential needs to be there, needs to be framed as part of your proposal, because, in fact, it needs to show up how, the proposal is changing the way a particular phenomena is understood. However, this should not be confused with the policy-oriented claims, I would say, or what is sometimes called policy washing, where social relevance is overstated without a clear connection to the core scientific contribution. So, in other words, the emphasis should remain on intellectual transformation rather than immediate policy applications. And in terms of theory, a strong proposal to me would not simply accumulate empirical observations, but builds what can be described as a conceptual framework, or what we could call a conceptual belt that connects empirical material, theoretical ideas, and also analytical claims into a coherent structure. And the aim here would be not only to study a phenomenon, as I said before, but to use it as a basis for theoretical advancement and transformations again. So the state-of-the-art section here is crucial, of course, because it shows all these, and the purpose is not to provide a sort of exhaustive summary of existing literature, but to position the project strategically within it. And this means, of course, to identify key debates, clarifying limitations in existing approaches, showing how the project intervenes in meaningful way around all these. And methodologically, the guiding principle is that methods must follow, of course, also here ambition. So this implies that methodological choices should be justified in terms of their capacity to answer the central research question and to support the conceptual ambition of the project. So in other words, the methods are not an independent layer of the proposal, but an integrated part of the overall argument. And last but not least, again, the feasibility that I mentioned before, which must be credible and realistic. And also here, I would say, keep an eye on these. Also, in terms of budget, in terms of time availability that you give for, enacting your ERC. These are all important aspects in terms of time, resources, and available expertise, which in fact should be thought very carefully. And I will stop here sharing. Thank you very much.